Bro Science Breakdown.
Fun fact, Marvel and DC characters must have some insane fitness routines to look the way they do. Welcome to Bro Science Breakdown, where I discuss healthy living for my fellow young folks every Monday. Thanks for stopping by. I'm Arthur, an early high school grad who struggled with my self-image for a long time. I was eventually able to overcome my struggles, and I might be able to help you with yours as well. So, if you're around 18, then you've come to the right place. This is episode 10, and you know what? I won't be talking about bro science versus actual science. That, man. I kind of had enough of talking about that, to be honest, and I'd rather bring in something new and fresh. So that's what I'll be doing. Drumroll please. Calculations. Essentially, I'll be creating specific routines through calculations for Marvel and DC characters to see how insane they'll get. Basically, I'll be calculating the total amount of protein, calories, and maximum weight they can lift based off of their feats of strength. I'll essentially be translating the godly strength of comic book characters into the real world. Well, translating as best as I can. I'm still human after all, you know? If you'd like, I can cover similar topics in the future, just let me know. For real though, comment what you want me to cover, and I'll be sure to do that as best as I can. Now before we start, I want to mention that this episode wouldn't be possible without the help of my wonderful girlfriend. They help me calculate the caloric expenditure of the heroes I'll be discussing with a much more informed perspective. That's because they know quite a bit about comics and have leagues more insight into the characters than I do. In fact, I'm considering making this a somewhat separate series of the Bro Science Breakdown podcast. So on one side, there will be the main series. That's where I just yap about whatever the hell I want in the field of weightlifting science. Then there will be the other series where I'll have my girlfriend as the second host of the podcast, and we'll be doing the same thing as I'm doing in this episode. Also, I just want to quickly mention this. Sorry for pulling a Zorro on you guys. This is to the 3 people that are actively listening to my podcast and wondering where the hell I wandered off to. I made a post recently announcing my hiatus, and I thought I'd be taking a simple week off. Well, that clearly wasn't the case. It was really difficult for me to get back into it, seeing as for me, even a week off of doing something consistently throws off the way I do things. Plus, as I was writing this episode, I decided to make the scheduling bi-weekly rather than every week. Yeah, I know, terrible timing, though it has several benefits. First, it allows me to put in my best work given the longer time span. Next, it gives me more freedom for longer episode length. Now that one's important, as cranking out episodes longer than 15 minutes a week with meticulous editing is pretty hard. And finally, I just want to be able to have a life outside the podcast. I don't see myself doing this full-time, just as a hobby. And in any case, I'm new to podcasting, so please cut me some slack. Well, alright, back to the episode. First off, let's talk about my favorite superhero, Batman. I mean, what's not to like about the guy? He's a billionaire who actually cares about people, is the world's greatest detective, and has candy in his utility belt for kids. Pretty baller dude, not gonna lie. Anyways, let's first go over his strength feats. Holy let me tell you, his strength is otherworldly. Despite not having any superpowers, he's absolutely yoked. He's the prime example of peak human conditioning. I don't think the likes of Eddie Hall or Brian Shaw can even compete with a specimen like Batman. So in Batman R.I.P. from 2008, Batman showed off some insane pressing strength. He was trapped by Black Love in a straitjacket, while buried alive in a coffin and with only 30 minutes of oxygen to boot. If I was in that situation, I would have accepted the fact that I was completely cooked and gave up. Let me know what you guys would have done in the comments. I'm pretty curious, not gonna lie. However, rather than simply giving up like me, he just straight up bench pressed the lid off of the coffin with the heavy ass loose soil on top. After some research, it turned out that the weight of the loose soil was 600 pounds. Pure insanity. Benching 600 pounds is one thing, but doing that while drugged, sleep deprived, psychologically tormented, in a straitjacket and a coffin is another. Batman's legs were out straight, which took away leg drive from the equation. All world record bench presses involved special equipment and leg drive, while Batman smashed through that in his state. Plus, the straight legs meant that all the weight was focused onto his pecs and triceps. Even forgetting the fact that he was in a straitjacket, the other factors just sound like the worst situation to be in while pulling up to the gym. However, Batman just plowed through the weight like the specimen he is. Oh, breaking news. I don't even need to calculate anymore. The comics explicitly state his max bench and leg press weights. So it turns out that Bruce can bench about 1,000 pounds and leg press about 2,500. After some quick mental math, I can tell that he's definitely part of the 1,000 pound club. But this also means that his approximate squat is about 1,335 pounds. Not gonna lie, I'm not sure how accurate that is, but I wouldn't doubt that Batman can squat more. His physique looks like he's able to compete in Mr. Olympia's classic division, given his proportions. I think he'd benefit most from the Arnold split, working out 6 times a week. The only thing preventing me from making it 7 is the fact that he's still human, meaning that even Batman can greatly benefit from a rest day from the gym. So here's how the split works. Back biceps Monday, legs Tuesday, shoulder and arms Wednesday, rest Thursday, then repeat the first 3 days for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And don't forget the steroids. Now let's move on to Batman's calorie and protein goals he needs to hit in order to maintain that juicy physique. Oh, sorry, Freudian slip. Batman stands at about 6 feet 2 inches and weighs 200 pounds. He therefore needs to eat a lot of food to maintain all that lean muscle. Some more conservative calorie estimates put his goal at about 4,000 pounds. Conservative estimates. Absolutely wild is a maintenance calorie goal, but that's just scratching the surface. Some estimates go as far as 8,000 calories, given how he probably works out 6 times a week with the weight he pushes along with his crime-fighting duties at night. Plus, I'd assume that fighting enemies like Darkseid takes a lot of energy to do as well, not gonna lie. I think that the middle ground of 6,000 calories a day is pretty reasonable. Remember, he's still human, I think. Alright, next up is Spider-Man. Specifically the Spider-Man from Earth 616. I don't want to bring in any godly into the equation. So this is a prime example of a person down on their luck. Spider-Man has been through countless harrowing life events, having been spit on by fate itself. The deaths of Uncle Ben and his girlfriend Gwen are just a taste of what Peter has gone through physically and psychologically. However, despite the tragedy that he's faced in life, he's one strong motherfucker. He's basically just an augmented human with spidey senses. Well, alright, it's not that simple. Me saying that likely sounds like I'm downplaying how strong Spider-Man actually is. I like Batman and all, but compared to Spider-Man, his strength is dwarfed. Let's first estimate Spider-Man's bench. So in the 365th issue of Amazing Spider-Man in 1992, Spider-Man was pushed into a dire situation. The lizard essentially collapsed Penn Station onto Spider-Man, forcing him to lift the debris to escape. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but Penn Station is massive. I'll put an image on the YouTube post if I'm up to it. So Penn Station spans about 8 acres in total, or covering 2 whole city blocks. The station features many steel structural beams, which weigh about 10 tons each. That's about the weight of a medium-duty truck, like the Ford 350 or the GMC Sierra F3500. But that's just scratching the surface of Penn Station's true weight. The materials used in the structure include brick, granite, and other rocks. That all adds up to about, 100,000 tons, or approximately 200 million pounds. As impressive as that sounds, that's unfortunately not the true weight that Spider-Man lifted. Honestly, that would have been baller, but still, his feat is still impressive nonetheless. So Peter lifted a large portion of the station, according to some people who did a deep dive into this feat. The force generated from this push, which includes several steel beams, train parts, and large concrete slabs, was calculated to be about 1,000 tons. That's 2 million pounds of pure pushing force. He's got 2 million pounds of pushing force, so that means he can bench 2 million pounds, right? Well, not quite. Spider-Man was pushing the weight up while standing, which is basically an overhead press in my book. To be honest, I think overhead press is a much more impressive lift than bench any day. It's lifting some heavy ass circles over your head. Name a single exercise that can beat that cool factor. Anyways, the approximate conversion rate between that and bench press is 1.6 times the weight. So a more accurate calculation of Spider-Man's maximum bench comes out to about 3.2 million pounds. Or, as Ronnie Coleman would say, 3.2 million solid-ass pounds. To be honest, I don't have a single clue about how I can go about calculating Spider-Man's max squat weight. If there was an official way of going about it, then I likely missed it somewhere. Anyways, from what I can see online, the average squat to bench press weight ratio is about 1 to 0.75. That basically means you can bench 75% of the weight you can squat for your 1 rep max. Now mind you, this is just a rough approximation, but the friendly neighborhood Spidey can seemingly squat 4.3 million pounds. That's like squatting 213 African bush elephants right there. Crazy weight Peter be pushing. Let's move on to his diet. Considering how much weight he's pushing, he must be eating a ton to compensate for that, right? Well, I'll first disregard the amount of weight he's doing and just focus on his physique. Then I'll throw in the fact that he's a goddamn freak of nature and the activity he does. As many of you might be aware of, Peter's physique is quite small relatively speaking. He's basically got the build of a gymnast or a small calisthenics athlete. It makes sense given his fighting style is not like Hulk's despite being strong as hell. His physique is perfectly suited for his agile and parkour-esque fighting techniques. Anyways, he weighs about 165 pounds and stands at 5 feet 10 inches, or about 178 centimeters. So using these factors, he'd be eating about 2,800 to 3,000 calories a day in order to maintain his physique. Not gonna lie, that's basically how much I need to maintain weight. This is basically the caloric expenditure of a person with Spider-Man's physique, without accounting for crime fighting and spider venom. Given how canonically Spider-Man has a super fast metabolism, I'll recalculate to account for that. Using Tour de France cyclists and Olympic swimmers as reference, poor Spidey over here will likely need, at the very least, 15,000 calories in order to account for his activity level. Alright gang, let's be honest. Peter here is gonna have a hard time affording it given how he's broke as f***. Out of curiosity, let's take into account his feats of strength and assume that he can bench the calculated amounts on a regular basis. To be honest, it's pretty crazy. I used the physics equation of work, mass times gravity times distance, dividing it all by 4,184 to convert joules into calories. I then multiplied by 5 to account for biomechanical deficiencies, as there are a ton of factors that go into calorie expenditure. After calculating using his heaviest lift, which was a rough estimate mind you, it all came out to be about 57,000 calories. To be honest, even after going through these calculations, I still feel like I messed up somewhere. Correct me if I'm wrong about this estimate in the comments. What about his fitness routine? Well, I think that to achieve such a physique, he'd be doing some advanced calisthenics split. Something tells me that he'd dabble in some super impressive skills like the back lever, Maltese, Victorian cross, and shit like that. So the split, according to his insane recovery, will look like this. Push, pull, legs, core, push, pull, legs. His rest days are delegated to rest hours, or even just one rest hour, given his superhuman ability to recover quickly. Alright gang, I'll be talking about one more superhero this episode. Yeah, I know, this isn't much, but I plan on having more future episodes dedicated to this specifically. Don't worry y'all. So let's now move on to the big brolic broccoli of Marvel, the Hulk. Just like Spider-Man, I'm going to be using the Earth 616 version of Hulk. To be honest, I might actually calculate the calorie expenditure of different versions just to see what happens, like the Darkest Knight or Cosmic Spider-Man. But that's another topic for another episode. Okay, no more distractions. Hulk is obviously a massive guy, and given how mass moves mass, his bench press is obviously going to be proportionally massive. First, let's cover the largest number, his deadlift. So the feat that I'll be using is from the Secret Wars issue 4. Molecule Man drops a 2-mile stretch of mountains on a group of Marvel heroes, which was explicitly stated to weigh about 150 billion tons. The Hulk single-handedly holds that up with his 2 hands, giving Mr. Fantastic time on how the hell the group can escape this dire situation. Now this feat translates pretty dubiously into deadlift territory, but that's the best I can do at the moment. I'm nearly certain that the muscles to hold up that weight are also recruited in the deadlift, so I'll just say that the Hulk can deadlift about 150 billion tons and call it a day. That's about 300 trillion pounds, which is insane. I gave up on trying to find an adequate feat that showcases his pushing power, so I'll go with a similar route with Spider-Man. Given how people can generally deadlift twice their bench press, I'll say that 75 billion tons is a good enough estimate for Hulk's bench press. That monster is in a league of his own. Now let's move on to his caloric expenditure. First, let's just calculate based on his measurements and activity level. Hulk weighs 1,150 pounds and stands at 7'6", or 229 centimeters. Given how he's quite the active broccoli, he would require about 11,000 calories in a day in order to maintain his hulking form. Get it? Cause he's the Hulk? Hulking? Yeah, okay, I'll move on. Now let's calculate the caloric expenditure of that one crazy lift with the mountain. I converted the 150 billion tons to kilos, multiplying by gravity and distance, which is about 2.5 meters. Then, I divided by 4,184 to convert joules to kilocalories. Finally, I multiplied by 5 to account for muscle efficiency. That leaves us with about, holy sh**, 3.98 trillion calories? Well, fun fact for that, it takes 1 billion people about 1.5 days in order to consume that much food, assuming each person eats 2,500 calories in a day. Finally, let's move on to his training. His physique is that of a strongman, though far more toned than any of them. That includes Eddie Hall, who who has really visible abs at 361 pounds of body weight. Anyways, his split might look like something like this: overhead, deadlift, bench press, event activities, legs, conditioning, and core. Allow me to elaborate on this more, as this might be confusing. So I think splitting benching and overhead will be more beneficial for strongman stuff, as there are activities in strongman competitions that require a ton of overhead strength. Then the event activities are stuff like tire flips and lifting Atlas stones. But for the Hulk, he'll probably be doing spaceship flips and lifting mountains instead. As for conditioning, which is basically cardio, I'm imagining he can do stuff like sled drags or wood choppers to have optimal performance. Whew, that was a fun episode. Thanks for listening all the way through. It means a lot. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. Please like, subscribe, comment, whatever to boost engagement, as it really helps the show. In the next episode, I'll be covering the results of the month of cold showers and the progress on the month of only calisthenics. This is Arthur, signing off.